Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on episode 9 of The Familiar of Zero. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. Last we left off, Kirsch and Tabitha left during summer vacation to head to Tabitha's home, and in so doing they've sort of insinuated themselves in some royal business. Meanwhile, Louise was the recipient, mistakenly, of a love potion and has fallen hopelessly in love with Saito, really to the consternation of everyone, really, because even though she's not beating him and being as, viciously and uncompromising as usual, she's being troublesome in a new sort of way. Now, normally during the opening theme, I would sit quietly with reverence, but today I am obligated to my sponsor. Today's sponsor is none other than myself. You may not know this, but I write light novels, and I've written quite a few. Today, I'm going to tell you about the eccentric detective Yamamoto, in which the intrepid, if drunken detective solves a wide variety of cases with the help of her assistant Satoshi. Ranging from finding missing pets and surveilling cheating spouses to catching a high-end cat burglar and preventing the murder of a local business magnate, no case is too big or too small for Detective Yamamoto. Even when she's forced to work with, and occasionally against, the police, and even when she must contend with her fear of the supernatural, nothing will prevent the eccentric detective from doing what needs to be done to solve the case. If this sounds like something you'd like to read, then by all means, consider purchasing books in the Eccentric Detective Yamamoto series by me, Frederick Fitzgerald, through Amazon. Thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the episode. Oh dear, so Saito's only really learning now that it was in fact a love potion. I mean, we all could have assumed that, and I feel like he probably could have assumed that as well, but, I don't know. I guess it's kind of interesting to me that Montmorency came out with it, saying like, look, you need to know what's going on so you can handle it, but really, I don't know how much of a handle anyone can really get on the situation, because Louise is normally so prickly and abrasive, but now, she's clinging to Saito like her life depends on it. And in a way, it's sort of, I don't necessarily want to say off-putting, but it's untenable in its own sort of way, Like, it's bad enough when Louise is so domineering and all that, but this creates a problem of its own. Like we saw in the very beginning, she was unwilling to let Saito go and wash laundry lest, he encounter another woman, which is totally beyond the pale from her perspective. Of course, Louise's delusions are not entirely unfounded, And I'm sure that Saito, when given the opportunity, will probably say the worst possible thing, that being his pattern. Now, I feel like, were I in Siesta's position, I would just get out of Dodge as fast as possible because, like, whatever's going on here, it's clearly not usual, and it's clearly not what I would normally expect to see, and so, perhaps the best thing one could do is, not be in the blast radius, so to speak. Unfortunately, Saito's made the unfortunate mistake of calling after Siesta even as she leaves, which, even if it is innocent, it's only going to provoke Louise. Oh. Saito made the worst possible decision. With both Siesta storming off and Louise running away, he decided to go after Siesta. That's going to pay dividends in the future, I'm sure. Now, Siesta's doing this particular thing where she lies, she claims that everything's okay and all that, but, she clearly is kind of unhappy about this. It is interesting that Saito's just sort of spilling the beans here about a love potion, because I don't know. I feel like this has to violate some sort of school rule, even if Siesta doesn't necessarily believe him. Oh boy, here we go. So it doesn't merely violate school rules, it violates the law writ large. So, yeah, I don't know. It seems like things are gonna get kinda dangerous in short order. So the question is, how is Saito going to patch things over? I feel like Louise is probably in a forgiving mood. Oh dear. I dare say she's in slightly more than a forgiving mood. But, oh dear. Man, so how is Saito gonna navigate this? Probably poorly. Now, the interesting thing about all of this, I reckon, is that Louise is being kind of honest. You know, she does have a few issues with telling the truth, particularly in regards to how she feels, but, you know, she's being rather upfront now that, you know, she has no appeal as a woman. Saito, despite, you know, sharing a room with her, doesn't try to do anything lascivious. And, you know, this sort of indicates that she would, if not necessarily like it, she would appreciate it. Which, you know, I can kind of understand that. So, you know, she's at something of a breaking point where she's just, you know, offering. It's like, look, you know, I'll close my eyes for an hour and we can, you know, do whatever. But, I mean, I think Saito is in the right here by being kind of hesitant about this whole thing. You know, like, suppose he did, you know, act on this. Like, what would happen once the potion wears off? I mean, the interesting thing is that Louise is claiming this is not the effect of the potion, which, I don't know, maybe she is being well and truly truthful here in a way that she wouldn't normally be. Although I guess from Saito's perspective, you can't exactly rely on that, you know. Louise has whipped him for less. And, I don't know. If I were him, I wouldn't be remarkably keen on all this. Alright, so Derflinger is, oddly enough, the voice of reason here. It's like, you know, look, this is a different situation, but isn't it, like, slightly preferable at least? And, you know, it sort of kind of is, but nevertheless, you know, Saito, I don't blame him for appreciating the status quo, so, I do believe there's slight mention of a cure, and, well, I guess maybe there wasn't. You know, Saito's just sort of, well, I guess he's decided to kick down the door and say, like, hey, you know, you're gonna solve this now before it wears off, which, I mean, it's not exactly tactful, but I suppose he is kind of in the right here. So Montmorency has let slip that, you know, there is a way to cure this, but she needs the ingredients for it. And I reckon that's probably the sticking point, you know? I mean, the key ingredient, it seems to be, is this thing called a spirit's tear, which is, not an easy thing to find, so... I mean, fortunately, Saito has the law on his side, I guess, that, you know, all this stuff is fairly illicit, so, you know, I guess everyone's gonna have to put in the work to try and find the ingredient. Alright, so that's something. You know, Montmorency knows where to find the spirit's tear, but getting it is not a guaranteed thing. Which, that leads me to believe you kind of have to strike a bargain or something. You know, like it could be an actual spirit's tear, in which case, you know, you have to contend with a disquiet spirit. Oh. Okay, so it's actually something much more difficult than that. You have to make a contract with what is effectively the embodiment of the element of water, which, you know, that's, it seems pretty important. So I have to imagine at this point, Saito's probably got to feel like at least a little tempted, right? You know, sure, he's making this claim about wanting to put Louise back to normal and all that, but, I don't know. It's a dangerous situation all around. Okay, so here's what's going on. They're going to Gallia, which, coincidentally, that's where Kirsch and Tabitha are. So I can't help but wonder if their paths are going to intersect. Well, come to think of it, Tabitha and Kirsch, they're going on some sort of a mission, right? Like, that's why Tabitha was called and Kirsch is just hanging along for the ride, but, I don't know. I can't imagine the two groups would be working at cross purposes, but they'll probably meet up to encounter the same sort of thing. Although, Montmorency didn't mention that it was the spirit of water. You know, I reckon that's not exactly a monster that people would want to deal with. Unless, of course, it's behind all that flooding lately. In which case, well, I don't know. Things are getting kinda messy. So that's something. Montmorency, she's asking why it's flooded this far out, which seems to indicate to me that flooding is, if not normal, then like somewhat expected. So, given that an entire village was swallowed up in the floodwaters, it seems as though things are pretty grim. I mean, we don't know much about the disposition of this spirit of water other than Montmorency made a contract at a young age, as is, tradition, but, I don't know. This spirit seeing fit to subsume a town like it has done, I don't know. It seems like stuff's going on here, and it's probably not good. I mean, maybe this is taking more of like a Fae approach. Like, who knows what Fae spirits want and all that. Sometimes they just kind of do whatever they want, but, I don't know, maybe the spirit's rational. So, Montmorency's kind of, going in on a chance here, assuming that the spirit will recognize her by a drop of blood and will show up. I'm not necessarily, certain that gamble's gonna pay off here. Because, if this is already, like, abnormally severe flooding, maybe the spirit's in no fit state to answer summons like that. Now, I say that, but then it does show up almost immediately. Which, in its own way might not be a good thing either. So Montmorency goes into a bit of a formal declaration of who she is and how she wants to talk to the spirit, and this seems to, I guess, get a favorable response. The spirit is taking on a humanoid form and speaking, which I guess is better than flooding things further, but I don't know. Oh dear. So Montmorency's already just leading with hey, can you do me a favor and give me one of your tears? Which, I mean, that's a little less than good. Maybe you should be offering something instead. I mean, Saito, I guess, has the right idea here, offering, something in exchange, whatever the spirit wants. Now, unfortunately, Saito's been a little careless with his wording. He's offering to do anything, which is a very big thing indeed to offer up to a magical spirit like this. Although I guess the spirit is, maybe lenient's not the right word, but it's merely saying look, there's some people causing mischief, go beat the brakes off them. Now that does seem simple enough in theory, but we don't know who these people are and what exactly they're doing, it could very well be I don't know, like an invading army or something setting up camp and polluting a river by virtue of there just being so many people around. So that's interesting. Everyone seems fairly certain that a powerful wind mage is essentially allowing a group to sit at the bottom of the lake, I mean, we do know a powerful wind mage, but I don't see why Tabitha would be causing trouble here. Oh dear. So again, Louise is kind of upset that Saito's even talking to Montmorency, but beyond that, she declares that she's actually being perfectly normal right now and that she just loves Saito. You do have to wonder how much of that is actually the truth, because, sure, she is under the effect of a potion, but that's not the only change to her personality, She has sort of softened up considerably. Now, meanwhile, we do see two cloaked figures doing something, and one of them wields a very familiar staff, so I guess my earlier assessment was right, well, partially right anyways. It seems as though the two groups might be working at cross purposes after all. It is kind of interesting. Guiche has decided to help Saito just because, it's befitting of a man of his station to do so. But it is interesting that they're essentially being pragmatic about things. Attacking without warning. It makes sense, but I can't help but get the feeling that it's slightly contrived. They're only behaving so pragmatically because it really seems like the enemies in question are really just their friends and they don't know it. So I don't really expect any real lasting injury to come of this, but I don't know. It seems just slightly convenient for my liking. So, despite what we've seen of him earlier, Guiche is actually, kinda competent, I suppose. At least that's how he appears. Now, he is fighting two mages by himself, so he's not exactly doing all that well, but given that Saito beat the brakes off him pretty handily before, I think this is a rather good showing from him. And at this point, despite having their cloaks drawn, I think it is fairly easy to say with certainty that it is Tabitha and Kirsch. Although, I wonder why they were so dead set on fighting Saito. I feel like you really can't mistake him for anyone else, and I guess once they realize it's him, they should kind of stop fighting. Although I guess, there's no more ambiguity if everyone's calling his name and Louise is failing to appropriately cast a spell. Okay, well I guess they're claiming poor eyesight then. It's too dark to notice who they were fighting. It makes sense, I suppose, but the real question is, what's going on here? Now that's interesting, why is Kirsch sort of talking down on the love potion? That sort of thing seems like it'd be right up her alley, although, she doesn't seem to be the type of person who would ever need to rely on that sort of thing. So that's interesting, Tabitha and Kirsch were sent here because the Spirit of Water is sort of all out of sorts. I guess neither party is truly the reason behind it. Oh dear. So only now does Saito have the big idea to ask the water spirit what's going on and why it's upset. I hate to say it, but that might have been a good thing to lead with, oh great water spirit, why are you so upset as to flood this entire village? Alright, so it's actually, kind of more simple than previously thought, Someone stole something guarded by the spirit, and now the spirit wants it back. So, yeah, I guess it's really that simple. Although Saito did sort of end up holding up his part of the bargain by fighting off a couple of people who were bedeviling the spirit, but I guess it kind of doesn't matter because Saito's already sort of making another pact with the spirit. It's kind of an ill-advised thing to do. He didn't need to necessarily do that, but I guess it's too late now. Ooh, that's a meaningful name right there, Cromwell. So this Cromwell guy has stolen a ring that creates false life. Yeah, okay, so now we're getting into real interesting political territory. Cromwell, and, I'm not exactly well versed on the history of it, but he was a guy who I believe sort of usurped the monarchy in England because the current king was doing some bad stuff, and Cromwell said, no, none of that, we're going to do good things now instead. And I do believe it was a very bloody civil war. So, for someone to be named Cromwell to have stolen something from a water spirit, it kind of doesn't bode well, politically speaking. Least of all for Princess Henrietta. I imagine things are going to get very dangerous for her now. Now, against all odds, Saito's managed to succeed here. He's promised to find the ring for the spirit, he got the tear, and then he, sort of asked it to recede back to normal water levels, and it's just doing it. So, it seems like everything's good, except now that Louise is back to normal, she is, deeply upset and deeply mortified about everything. And I get that, but at the same time, surely Saito should be at least given a little benefit of the doubt because, he refused to act on anything. He behaved himself. Oh dear, I guess the princess has seen fit to show up, which, perhaps does indicate that things are dangerous. Although, she seems to be showing up here under good circumstances. Oh boy, so elsewhere, it turns out that 4K is in league with Cromwell now. So things are definitely heating up politically speaking. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.